You see, I watched those clips again and I remember how heartfelt I found the film and how moving. What's confusing about it, if you like, is just it's everywhere. All the posters and indeed the trailers makes me feel that it's a kids' film and it's about football. I'm not sure it's a kids' film. It's probably a young teenage film. It's certainly not about football. It's a road trip movie.
I think there's a bit of an identity crisis around the whole film, really, because the other reference point that I've seen used, and the producers themselves have used this, is Slumdog Millionaire. And on the face of it, you think, well, here's a story about young people, about kids. It's incredibly uplifting. It's set in a developing world. It seems like an obvious comparison. This isn't Slumdog. I mean, Slumdog was a huge emotional juggernaut of a movie. Africa United, although the logistics of actually getting this film made were probably quite epic, on screen, it's and this isn't a criticism, but it's a small-scale, modest quest movie for kids.
Yeah. None of the kids, or not none, that's actually unfair. Some of the kids haven't acted before, and the girl who plays Beatrice, I have to just single her out because she was, I thought, brilliant in it. A
lot of the kids are great. I mean, there's a lot to like about the film, and there's a lot to give the filmmakers credit for. In terms of the issues it deals with, I mean, it doesn't shy away at any stage from the realities of making a film about modern Africa. The HIV crisis is in the story from the first scene. As the story unfolds, the issue of child soldiers comes into play, and it touches on prostitution. It doesn't back away from any of that. I mean, it very much has the courage of its convictions. The problem is that it's trying to fold those kind of issues, very harrowing, very complex issues, into a film for 11, 12, 13-year-old kids. It's a very ambitious goal for the filmmakers to set themselves. I'm not sure they entirely kind of execute the tightrope walk, because there are moments, say for example with the child soldiers plotline, where you almost feel that it's become panto, it's become Scooby-Doo.
It's also, I just want to mention this because it's only very small in the film. It's a live-action film, but there's occasional moments of animation, and I just thought these were moments of light relief and very beautifully done.
There's a lot to like about the film. Yeah. There's a lot to like about the film. I just had reservations.
OK. Mary and Max is the story of an unusual friendship that spans 22 years. It begins when Mary, a lonely 8-year-old girl in Melbourne, writes to Max, a 44-year-old living in New York.
In cities and suburbs, all over the world, there are those who find life a little confusing. Who find the things that people say,
"Be a creep!"
the things they do, and the stuff that just happens, quite bewildering. But sometimes those who find the world impossible find each other.
Dear Max, I am 8 years old. It would be great if you could be my friend.
Dear Mary, thank you for the letter. I find the world very chaotic. Because my mind is very literal and logical.
Where do babies come from in America? In Australia, they are found in beer glasses. Here is a drawing of me.
Babies are laid by Catholic nuns. If you're an atheist, they're laid by dirty, lonely prostitutes.
My mother likes smoking and sharing.
My father left my mother when I was 6. She shot herself with my uncle's gun.
Can you explain love? Have you got a girlfriend, Max?
She kisses me without my permission.
I know love upsets you, so I won't go on about it. All I want to say is that love is obviously not for me.
Danny.
It was a word that we possibly overused last week, but I'm going to use it again. I love this film. And it's interesting, as soon as you see claymation, I think the reference point that you think of for you, for me, for the audience, is Wallace and Gromit. And on one level, I was going to say you couldn't get a story which was further away from Nick Park and Wallace and Gromit than Mary and Max. There is an essential sweetness, actually, about the story, which I think binds the two together weirdly. It's a very dark story. I mean, you've got a story here of two very, very lonely, troubled characters. An 8-year-old girl who's being very badly bullied, her mother's an alcoholic, a 44-year-old man suffering with what we later find out is Asperger's syndrome. But there's such a poignancy to this film, and there's such humanity, weirdly, for a claymation film. It's simply lovely.
I love claymation, as you know. I think the first thing I ever said to you was, did you like Morph?
I like jazz.
Yes, well, quite. It's often a test. What's amazing about it, and the director says this, that he actually wants people to see fingerprints on the characters and see that the rooster's been painstakingly made. This was a 52-week shoot. That's before they've even got into the editing suite. The tone, just the colours of it, because New York is black and white and red, and Melbourne is just brown, and that's really worth mentioning just the work that's gone into it.
No, I agree. I mean, the claymation is incredible, but I mean, I think what's incredible about the movie and makes Mary and Max so special is that within 5 minutes, within 3 minutes, within the first scene, you've forgotten that these are claymation figures. I mean, it does look brilliant, but at the same time, these are human characters, and this is a very human story. If I was looking for a way to kind of to explain this film to someone, I wouldn't talk in terms of animation. I'd actually talk in terms of possibly the movie Little Miss Sunshine from a couple of years ago, just in terms of the tone it strikes, which it does so beautifully, of the light and the dark, and just the right degree of bittersweet without becoming sentiment. The real film I'd compare it to is Harold and Maude, actually, from the early 70s, directed by Hal Ashby. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a marvellous, marvellous film. It doesn't follow exactly, Mary and Max doesn't follow exactly the same kind of... Absolutely, it doesn't. I mean, Harold and Maude is a romance, Mary and Max very much is not, although it does follow Mary into adulthood. But again, in terms of that tone, which is so difficult for filmmakers to strike, I mean, it gets it spot on. The other point I'll make is that actually, although we were talking last week about Despicable Me, which I very much enjoyed, with animations normally, the voice talent, as they're called, don't make any difference to me. Despicable Me, I wasn't even really aware that Steve Carell was in the film. Here, Philip Seymour Hoffman, particularly. I mean, Toni Collette plays Mary and does a great job.
Eric Bana is the young Romeo. He only has about 4 lines, but that's brilliant.
Eric Bana is fantastic. Yeah. But I will stick up for Philip Seymour Hoffman,
yeah,
who plays Max, because this is performance of the week, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. Please, please try and see it. Mary and Max is on limited nationwide release, and you can go to the Film 2010 website to find out where it will be playing. Also out this week is Carlos, the story of the real-life terrorist known to the world as Carlos the Jackal.
Momento de la acción. Tenete a todos los revolucionarios juntos luchando al mismo tiempo. Tú me dices arrogante, pues sí, no jodas, soy un arrogante.
How long have you been with us? You are still a boy. I need men.
So you don't trust me because I'm young?
You have to prove yourself.
Like you, I strongly believe that the Palestinian struggle should take at an international level. And I will be honored to contribute some of my modest skills.
First of all, I just should explain that this comes in 2 formats, if you like. There's the long one, that's 330 minutes, 5.5 hours. There's the short one, 165 minutes, 2 hours 45. My main advice, I mean, you'll talk about this more, but my main advice is see the long one. And I wouldn't say that about many things, because if you see the short one, you're constantly aware that it's being edited, aren't you, Dan?
I think so. I mean, the history of Carlos is this actually started life as a miniseries for French TV. And so when you see the 5.5 version, that's the miniseries, and that's how it was meant to be seen. The slimline drop-in on your way home from work 2 3/4 hour version, I still think it's very rich, and it's still a very impressive, powerful piece of filmmaking. But yeah, you don't quite get the whole picture. It's like watching it's like watching half The Sopranos, essentially, or half The Wire. Yeah. That's the context that the film was made in. It's interesting because the director, Olivier Assayas, is a fantastic filmmaker, but he comes very squarely from the tradition of sort of European art house filmmaking. And Carlos does have these kind of almost blockbustery action movie overtones. What's so impressive is he handles those beautifully. There's a real depth to this film. But also, if you want an action movie this weekend, forget about Red, go and see Carlos.
Yes, very good point. And Edgar Ramirez is absolutely brilliant.
He's great.
Now, this week's questionnaire is Pan Labyrinth director Guillermo del Toro.
I love a B or Z movie, horror movie that most people would forget, called The Car, with James Brolin. And I love it to the point where I'm having the car from that movie handmade in steel right now. So that's going to be my car in LA for every day. I always cry at the end of City Lights. I love the peripatetic nature of Chaplin's stuff. He combines the tragedy and the comedy in a unique way. And City Lights, when the girl finally realizes who he is, I always cry. I'm not a huge fan of Todd Browning's Dracula.
I hope you will find this comfortable.
Thanks. It looks very inviting. Ouch.
I love Todd Browning, but I never fell in love with Lugosi. I love Lugosi when he plays wilder parts, you know, like when he plays against Karloff. But him alone, I was never a big fan of.
Oh, it's nothing serious, just a small cut from that paperclip.
Can I name a few? Eyes Without a Face, Beauty and the Beast by Cocteau, Touch of Evil by Orson Welles, Seven Chances by Buster Keaton, Greed by Von Stroheim, and keep going. I think the most influential working filmmaker today is sadly not working enough, which is Terry Gilliam. I think Brazil really came in and almost gave birth to an aesthetic, including Junot and Caro and many other European filmmakers that latched onto his aesthetic.
Brilliant answers. That's all for this week. Next week, we'll be reviewing The Kids Are All Right, The Hunter and a Frank Capra double bill. Tonight was the world premiere of the restored print of The Great White Silence, the film of Captain Scott's tragic polar expedition a century ago. It's been restored by the BFI and will be released in May 2011. We have an exclusive look to play us out tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.